Kusile masaramahle sinivusele sinemukele namhlehleleni Kusile Breakfast Show and Happy New Year. Sithemba ukuthi ningene kahle eminyakeni lomusha wa 2025. Labanye ke bebasemasonveni, labanye bangena eminyakeni lomusha basetindzaweni tabo lethi bajabulisako, labanye bebahleli nje emakhaya nemindeni yabo. Sithemba ukuthi siphephile sonke, siubonile umnyaka wa 2025. Bonenge bamfube bafisile ukuthi kuphumelele eminyakeni wa 2024. Sithemba ukuthi lokho labe bakufisile noma labe bakucela kuNkulunkulu kuphumelele. Sithemba futhi ukuthi sisaqala nje umnyaka lomusha wa 2025 kuNkulunkulu toba nathi njengoba abenathi eminyakeni wa 2024. It's a very good morning and welcome to the program. It's the 1st of January 2025. Bidola mingi ngilungelele makagula ukukhumbuta nje ukuthi sikhona ku YouTube nakhona ungasibukela ikhasi lethu ngeEswatini TV. Namhlanje njengoba tilunye enyangeni yaBhimbidvwane sifuna ukukhuluma kabantu ngetindzaba konga imali njengoba sicala nje umnyaka sifuna ukukhulumisana neeconomist Sanele Sibiya sichushisa ukuthi si save kanjani imali njengoba sicala nje umnyaka udokhumula ukuthi labanye abahlangabetana netinkinga dokubhadala boshayelo kuseba netinkinga dokuboleka imali emabhange etizafoti etikoleti. Sifuna ukuva ukuthi ngabe lokusicala umnyaka nje ngabe ithini savings plan langasecwayisa ngayo ukuthi siyende labaningi baye basicwayise ukuthi si investe lapha nalapha songe imali lethide lokunganani ekhulwini emholweni wakho lokholako ukubeke eceleni ukonge for rainy days. Sifuna ukuva ukuthi ngabe sikwenda kanjani lokho sicalculate kanjani le mali kude sikhona ukuthi nangabe khona lesikongako sikhona ukuthi sichubeke siphile. Labanye ke bayonga imali ngokuthi bayafake ukuthi stokvel kuma savings club noma bayifaka kubo umshwalense noma bayinveste ngekuthenga ama properties lokuningi lokunye labakondako nje konga imali. Sanele Sibiya sabe sinaye kusi asichushise ukuthi ngabe sikwenda kanjani lokulenyanga nje letako noma kulenyanga lesetulu batali kakhulu kade bathi baba frustrated ngetindzaba tabo school fees, tindzaba tekuthenga ama uniforms but that kanza sabayakuboshayela kusifuna ukuva ukuthi ngabe baphuma kanjani kulesimo lesi bangadi sita kanjani kulesimo lesi. Hlala nathi ongayinzawo kumanje saselikhefu sabe netindzaba desiswati.
Welcome to the ultimate guide to your weekend entertainment. Get ready to groove with us as we bring you the hottest music videos and exclusive interviews with your favorite celebrities. Experience fresh music videos from new releases, underground sensations, and emerging talent. Whether you're hip-hop, amapiano, or Afro, we've got something for everyone.
And if you've missed out on any of the excitement, don't worry, we've got you covered. Join us for an electrifying journey through the music scene. Relive the magic and get inspired for your next weekend adventure.
You can be stuck on you. I go so for me, I go for me too.
So tune into This Week at Eswatini for a weekly dose of music, entertainment, and unforgettable experience. Get ready to groove because the weekend starts here.
You can be stuck on you.
Come on, it's a simple song. Sing with me. Say,
you can be stuck on you.
Asifunze semukele natiti indzaba. Bobishopi bema Roma bemavela hlukene sabanikelele bakhoseli kumalinza refugee camp ngempahla lelinganiselwa ko 100,000 emalangeni. Lokuvete ngumbishop ema Roma eveni Bishop Jose Luis abuka ukuthi isimo sinjani njengoba solo bayatheleka belive leMozambique kuyo indzawo legcina abakhoseli eveni.
Kulandzela umsindvo lochubeka kweveni laseMozambique, ingcenye yesive iyachubeka nekutheleka Eswatini kutokhosela kumalinza refugee camp. Umbishop wamaroma eveni Jose Luis uthi kunikelela abakhoseli bakhambisa imbili njengoba kuyindlela labagubha ngayo lusuku lwekutwala kwenkhosi Jesu.
Elisuka lo Miguel usuka giti lapa Eswatini kodwa usuka futhi kuba bishopi from the Southern African Catholic Bishops Conference. Botswana, South Africa, nami lapa Eswatini. Ingati ya bishopi beswa ukuthi ukona bafowethu nabodadewethu basuka eMozambique. Bakhulume nami bacela ukusiza. So, selected 150 mattresses and 150 blankets. Yesterday the Prime Minister spoke about 900 people arriving here from Mozambique.
Lobuka kusebenta kwendzawo legcina abakhoseli bongekile mamba uthi sebangetulu kwenkulungwane bakhoseli baseMozambique labafike kulamalanga.
Siyabonga nje kakhulu ngoba liqiniso lithi vele size sifike esigabeni la sidideka khona ukuthi sigababeka etukwane sithi khanze sesibaniketa nemabhokisi kuze ukuthi umuntu akhone kulala. But lapha nje baningi bantu labatawusitakala kunebantu labatawufika kunebantu lasebavele bakhona la ngekhathi lokhanzakale ukuthi tindvo setisiphelele. Uma ukhuluma ngebantu labangetulu kwa-1000 umuntu kufuna ukuthi adle ekuseni emini nantsambama njengabo bonke abantu. Singaba naso sicelo ukuthi vele singajabula uma singathola any form of donation, kungaba kudla kungaba yini, because labanye bantu nje kulaba labakhona sesike sizama nokuthi sibabukele impahla kuletu lesinato, because labanye bede bagcoke lokho labagcokile. Enzabeni yekudla ke vele siyakhala kakhulu, siyadikhalela nathi ukuthi leyo nje longakhona kusisita ngeke asiphe lokho lokudliwako singajabula kakhulu ngoba vele ekitchen siyashoda, and the more bangena it's the more nelibhodo lifuna kwethi lenyuke isikali sibe setulu.
Mamba uthi ucela sive semaswati sponsor liJazz Vivaneni njengoba bayaludzinga lusito ekunakekeleni bakhoseli. Umbiko uhlanganiswe ngithembelihle Magutshwa Embaka.
Benhlangothilo libuke kuhlandeka kwekudla itiko letempilo bacela sive ukuthi sicaphelisise sisathenga kudla singathengi kudla lesekujutene kuphelelwa isikhathi nalesekonakele. Sibusiso lokuthwako waluhlangothi uthi solo bayachubekani kuhlola kudla etitolo.
Sitawuthi nje sicele ukuthi sisathenga nanamuhla konke nje kudla lihlobo lesitawuthi ngathi sibe nayo. Asicaphele kakhulu indzaba ukuthi kudla lesikuthenga kwakusikweni kudla lokho expired ngoba ezisithathenga nje kube kunengi kukhanza silokunye sekujutane nekusike expire sikudle kusale lokudla bese ke expire kuse shelfini lakho lokho kudla. Sitawucela ukuthi emaswati asibambise ngokuthi akubuke lokudla labakuthengako ukuthi kukudla lokanjani, yakho kati nenyama nje uma ngabe siyothenga leyo nyama yokuthi sitokhona ukuthi sose namhla sajuba umnyaka. Umphaka acaphele ukuthi le nyama la ithenga uyithola kuphi. Isikhathi esiningi tiba khona tindzawo letithengisa inyama letindzawo letisemthethweni lapho inyama yakhona iyapotsholwa ngibo bahloli betempilo. Lese singathi ke abasibambise ngalendlela yokuthi babe nesiciniseko ukuthi inyama labayithengako bayithenga etindzaweni letifanele. Lokunye ke siyathi lokuthi bakudla sitabana kube kuningi vele lokungenteka sikudle lokudla lokunye kusale ikubide sesikudla ngakusasa. Sitawucela nje ukuthi emalangeni lamahla sibambise ekuthenini lokho kudla lokho bakugcine kahle. Phindze futhi ke noma nase bakulungisela sebatakudla naso lesithi ke sekufuthumeta. Siye sithi kudla kufuna ukuthi kube ku temperature lengetulu kwa 60 degrees Celsius. Nakukudla lokugcina ukuthi kufuna kuseve kushisa. Nangabe kungilokufuna ukuthi kuhlale kubanza kube ngephasi kwa 5 degrees Celsius.
Lesikhathi sekugubha emaholide abokhisimusi kanye nekujuba umnyaka umtholampilo ye-AHF Eswatini ilamvela seklinikhi ibone kunyuka kwetinombolo talabavakashela bayofuna kulashwa tifo telicansi ema-STIs kanye nalabo labafuna kuvikelwa ngaphambi nangemuva kokuya ecansini bangakafaki ijazi lemkhwenyane i-PrEP kanye ne-PEP.
It looks like during this period I don't know, sometimes people think that they go on holidays as far as their health is concerned. Some of them, they will stop taking, for example, those who are on ARVs, they will be traveling home, they will be traveling here and there.
Kula maholide lawa labanye bantu babese baba nebudlapha ngetimpilo tabo labanye labanatsi amaphilisi ekutsinzibalisa i-HIV AIDS bayawayekele lamaphilisi babuye nakucala inyanga yaBhimbidvwane bayaye bavakashele emaveni angephandle bashiye lamaphilisi abo ngemuva. Lokhu-ke yintfo lembi njengaloku kungabangela ukuthi ligciwane ligwame. Bakhona labo labenta licansi lingakaphephi lokhu kungabangela ukuthi batfole tifo telicansi. Tifo telicansi tinyusa lizinga lekuthi umuntu atfole i-HIV AIDS. Ngiyanicela maswati akithi ukuthi nitiphephise nisatijabulise. Akusebenziswe ijazi lemkhwenyane ngaso sonke isikhathi. Kula netingane letinyenti kungabangela sifo semdlavuza wemlomo wesibeletho kubomake. Kula maholide lawa kuyaye kukhule kakhulu nekukhulelwa kwabantu basuke bangakakuhleleli lokho kukhulelwa kwabo. Labo lesibavele basenkingeni ngekonto yelicansi lelingakaphephi bangasihlola. Batfole lisito lamahala kuto tonke tifo telicansi sikakhulu emtholampilo kaManzini futhi siyayezivale nangabo 9 ebusuku.
So the doors are open. We are also screening for STIs. We are providing pre-exposure prophylaxis. We have the tablet. We have the what we call event-driven pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Kutemidlalo mengameli wenhlangano lengamele umdlalo we-rugby lapha eveni bandile ivela kade uthi umnyaka wa 2024 nanome bangakakhoni kwenda tonke timvo alabe batifisile kodwa bakhonile kungeda imigcozelwano yalomdlalo ekakhulukazi esigabeni sama-7s baphinze bakhethana elikhethelo lesive labomake kwekucala ngemuva kweminyaka leminingi. Vela kade uthi eminyakeni wa 2025 bafisile ukuthi batfole labo labatobasekela ngetimali badlalise imidlalo ye-league kanye nekuthi likhethelo lesive sizeze likhone kungenela imidlalo yangephandle.
Cishe sihambe umgamo kulokhu besikhathi sekufisile ku-achieve in terms of development, in terms of women rugby nekuthi sibe nawo ema-tournaments. Ngicabanga ukuthi inhlangothi tonke lesinato la kule pool yethu ye kufuna kudlalisa ngetigaba letihlukene. Ngicabanga ukuthi nje sithinze cishe tingoni tonke lokufaka ikhathi yona i-women rugby lapho sibone khona nekuhamba kuze sikhone nekuthi sikhiphe likhethelo lecala le-president select kubo bosisi. Ngicabanga ukuthi sitikale kulo mgamo ukuthi cha cishe kusebenzekile ngosi. Ngicabanga ukuthi nangabe ukhona kwenda ukuthi nakucala umnyaka uphinze uyophela ukhone ku-achieve uphinze ukuphinze leyo ngeminyaka lolandzelako. Kuyasimendela noma mhlawumbe kuyakha le foundation lemcoka lekukhulisa lo mdlalo wethu. So ngicabanga ukuthi nje ngiyiconsistency sasibuka sibone ukuthi cha cishe siachievile ngakiyo ngiyo mhlawumbe lesicabanga ukuthi isakhela le base letawuchubeka isimikise embili kulo mdlalo wethu.
Ngaleto temidlalo siyadiphetha sidabahlole temakethe nasibuya sibuka ngaphandle kwakuleli.
Throughout 2024, hope has been hard to find. Wars are causing enormous pain, suffering, and displacement. Inequalities and divisions are rife, fueling tensions and mistrust. And today, I can officially report that we have just endured a decade of deadly heat. The top 10 hottest years on record have happened in the last 10 years, including 2024. This is climate breakdown in real time. We must exit this road to ruin, and we have no time to lose. In 2025, countries must put the world on a safer path by dramatically slashing emissions and supporting the transition to a renewable future. It is essential and it is possible. Even in the darkest days, I've seen hope power change. I see hope in activists, young and old, raising their voices for progress. I see hope in the humanitarian heroes overcoming enormous obstacles to support the most vulnerable people. I see hope in developing countries fighting for financial and climate justice. I see hope in the scientists and innovators breaking new ground for humanity. And I saw hope in September when world leaders came together to adopt the Pact for the Future. The Pact is a new push to build peace through disarmament and prevention, to reform the global financial system so it supports and represents all countries, to push for more opportunities for women and young people, to build guardrails so technologies put people over profits and rights over runaway algorithms, and always to stick to the values and principles enshrined by human rights, international law, and United Nations Charter. There are no guarantees for what's ahead in 2025, but I pledge to stand with all those who are working to forge a more peaceful, equal, stable, and healthy future for all people. Together we can make 2025 a new beginning, not as a world divided, but as nations united.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Let's take a look at international news. An Israeli military operation targeting Hamas militants near the Kamal Adwan Hospital has put the last major health facility in northern Gaza out of service, the World Health Organization said.
This is the site of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Bet Lahia. It was the last major health facility in the north of Gaza, but the World Health Organization and local health officials say an Israeli raid has officially put it out of service.
The Kamal Adwan Hospital has been subjected to a concentrated military campaign that was aimed at forcing everyone to evacuate. There were about 350 people inside, including medics, patients and civilians. We can confirm that the occupation forces have burned down all the hospital's facilities.
Gaza health officials also say Israeli forces have detained dozens of staff from the hospital, including its director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. He'd been warning that Israeli forces were besieging the hospital and issuing evacuation orders that morning. The IDF claims it had become a Hamas stronghold, used as a hideout by militants. The UN has called on the protection of health facilities.
Sick and injured children are going into this hospital. We're going into this hospital to get treatment. Sick and injured men, women, were also going there with medical personnel, risking their lives in some cases to continue to provide services to people who really need it.
The WHO believes a number of patients in critical condition remain in the hospital, along with dozens of medical personnel. The raid comes a day after an Israeli strike killed 5 staff members in the same area.
Desertion is starving the Ukrainian army of desperately needed manpower and crippling its battle plans at a crucial time in its war with Russia, which could put Kyiv at a clear disadvantage in future ceasefire talks. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops, tired and bereaved, have walked away from combat and frontline positions to slide into anonymity, according to soldiers.
Alexander is one of the tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who walked away from the front line to return home. For 6 months, he watched his fellow servicemen die in Russian attacks.
We just wanted to live. We had no combat experience. We were just ordinary working people from a village.
He remembers very little from the year he spent at home in Lviv because of the concussions he suffered. He's since returned and is being trained with a different battalion. But official figures show that more than 90,000 cases have been opened into instances of soldiers deserting since Russia invaded in 2022, with a sharp increase over the past year. A number of them don't return after being granted a break or medical leave. Exhausted by the war, they're both physically and psychologically scarred.
There were many cases where someone went to see their family for 10, 15 days and thought, well, screw it, I'm not going back.
In an effort to address manpower shortages, Ukrainian lawmakers approved an amnesty in August for first-time offenders who voluntarily returned to their units. Prosecutors said in early December that 8,000 servicemen returned in November alone. This soldier was one of them. He explains what made him walk away.
Even just staying under constant shelling results in a gradually damaged mental state. You go crazy little by little. You're constantly under stress, huge stress. And you lose control of yourself.
Going against his family's advice, he decided to return. But the number of Ukrainian troops deserting is still growing, and the government is struggling to find new recruits. It represents a critical challenge for Ukraine, which is losing territory to Russia at the fastest rate since the early days of the 2022 invasion.
In 2024, billions of people across the world faced climatic conditions that broke record after record, logging ever more highs for heat, flood, storms, fire and drought. As the year drew to a close, the conclusion was both blatant and bleak. 2024 was the hottest year since records began, according to EU climate scientists.
This lake in Sicily, once described as an eternal spring, all but dried up for the first time on record this year, due to a lethal mix of hot weather and low rains. In India, residents lived through their longest ever heatwave, with 24 consecutive days above 40 degrees. And almost everywhere on Earth, people experienced 41 additional days of dangerous heat.
The poorest, least developed countries on the planet are the places that are experiencing even higher numbers. So places like Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, Kiribati are experiencing 150 or more days just this year that are at dangerous levels of heat that we can attribute directly to climate change.
World Weather Attribution released analysis of 2024 on Friday. They say shows how dangerous life has already become under human-induced warming. Ocean temperatures are rising and more water is evaporating, which increases the risk of torrential rain, as seen in the deadly floods in Valencia in autumn. Warming sea surfaces also accelerate the force of winds when they make landfall, which some scientists say can make cyclones even more powerful, such as the recent one that ravaged Mayotte. And an increase in drought and wildfires led to huge biodiversity loss.
We need to move away from fossil fuels much faster and completely if we want to avoid ever more extreme events that also will reach the limits of what societies are able to adapt to, and not get distracted by discussions of whether it's too late to do this, if not.
The report's authors say 26 weather events killed or contributed to the death of at least 3,700 people this year and displaced millions.
A different approach to energy is at the center of President-elect Donald Trump's promise to bring down the cost of living for Americans. VOA reports Trump's plans could be complicated by a complex global interdependence on oil and gas supplies.
A signature campaign promise in August from then Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump.
Our effort to bring the cost of living under control will be the all-out push to end the Biden-Harris war on a thing called American energy. American energy. We will drill, baby, drill.
Is set to become a top priority when the now president-elect is sworn into office on January 20th. Trump aims to boost oil supplies by speeding up permits for drilling and increasing oil exploration off the U.S. coastline. Some analysts say that move could get pushback from oil companies.
We don't really have means to force companies to drill for more oil. And often, investors will have their own concerns about, well, if we have too much oil production, prices might drop.
Trump has also proposed expanding exports of LNG, liquefied natural gas. Qatar's energy minister Saeed Sharida Al-Kabi said earlier this month he had no concerns about Trump's pledge to lift a cap on LNG exports.
Additional LNG and additional competition is welcome. At the end, even if you open up LNG and say we're going to export another 300 million tons from the US or 500 million tons from the US, all these projects are driven by private enterprises that look at the commercial viability of projects.
Trump's pick to lead the Department of Energy, Chris Wright, the CEO of an oil field services firm, clashed with Democratic Congressman Sean Casten earlier this year over his statements about climate change.
You said there is no climate crisis. We're not in the midst of an energy transition either. Humans and complex life are simply impossible without carbon dioxide. The idea of carbon pollution is outrageous. You agree you said all those things?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's all...
We could get into which one of those.
Many of Trump's energy plans cannot be accomplished without cooperation from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and other oil producers.
We export a lot of energy products to both Canada and Mexico. And so if there were reciprocal tariffs from those countries, that could have a negative impact on our producers. So I think most of the energy industry is hoping that this is just the opening salvo.
In a stark contrast to the Biden administration, which prioritized renewable energy and combating climate change, Trump is also expected to cut tax credits for electric vehicles.
Finnish authorities have linked a kilometers-long anchor-dragging track to a ship carrying Russian oil in last week's suspected sabotage of major power and telecom cables in the Baltic Sea. It's the latest in a series of similar incidents in recent months.
A tanker carrying Russian oil is being held off Finland's coast as authorities investigate damage caused to power and internet cables last week in the Baltic Sea. Finnish police said Sunday they had discovered a dragging track dozens of kilometers long on the sea floor, apparently caused by an anchor.
4 cables have been broken. We were able to get the situation under control and locate the ship in question, bring it to Finnish waters, and begin a criminal proceeding.
Finnish authorities suspect the Cook Islands registered Eagle S is part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet of aging vessels used to evade Western sanctions on its oil exports, imposed in the wake of Moscow's 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin has not directly responded to accusations of sabotage. The damage to the S-Link 2 power cable and 3 telecom lines is just the latest in a series of similar incidents in the Baltic Sea. In November, a Chinese vessel was suspected of severing 2 fibre-optic data cables in Swedish waters. Last year, the Baltic Connector gas pipeline linking Estonia and Finland was damaged. 10 months later, China said a Hong Kong-registered vessel had caused the damage in a storm, but Finland was sceptical of the admission. Estonia is calling for maritime laws to be updated.
It can't be by accident. This kind of situations are not typical not only for our region, but also for other regions in the world. So the technological developments that we have, we think that it is a good idea to look over also the international law to make these investigations more smoothly.
NATO said Friday it would boost its presence in the Baltic Sea. The alliance recently staged maritime drills in the region, but responding to apparent hybrid attacks, such as the targeting of undersea cables, is complex, says analyst Charlie Salonius Pasternak.
If you attribute it or you blame
someone, will you kind of intensify the circle, and what are you going to do about it? Because you clearly cannot use the same retributionary tools, as it were, against Russia and China, at least not yet, I think.
Authorities say it could take until August to repair the damage to the Estlink 2 cable.
U.S. gun violence prevention measures have been strengthened under the Biden administration, but big policy changes are expected once President-elect Donald Trump takes office in January.
That gun owners' rights will be protected under his leadership is a promise that President-elect Donald Trump has said he'll swiftly deliver on.
In my second term, we will roll back every Biden attack on the Second Amendment. The attacks are fast and furious, starting the minute that Crooked Joe shuffles his way out of the White House.
Almost 47,000 lives were lost to gun violence in 2023, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. President Joe Biden put a series of measures in place that researchers say are helping to bring that number down.
This includes the American Rescue Plan funds to support community violence intervention programs. The Biden administration has strengthened the ability of the ATF and the FBI to regulate the industry.
Gun rights advocates say these measures violate the right to bear arms granted in the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. They are confident Trump will do away with them.
We don't think that they've done anything to keep people safe. All they've done is infringe on Second Amendment rights.
Supporters are also eager for Trump to fulfill his pledge to sign a concealed carry reciprocity law. It would facilitate permit holders traveling to all 50 states with their weapons.
In each state that you pass through, you have to look up their specific gun laws, and in some cases you wouldn't be legal to carry in those particular states. So that's something that we would like to see at the federal level.
Frank Cimarelli's son, Camden, who had a history of mental health problems, died weeks after shooting himself in 2022 with a legally purchased gun. Cimarelli would like gun safety measures such as enhanced background checks to remain in place under the Trump administration.
You know, if a mom or dad wants to keep a gun in the house for protection, I have no problem with that. The problem I have is, why does your right to have a gun overshadow my right to keep a gun out of my house?
Pew Research surveys show there's broad bipartisan support among the public for preventing people with mental illness from purchasing guns. But Americans remain deeply divided on most gun policy proposals.
Americans are sharing reflections on the country's 39th president, Jimmy Carter, following his death on Sunday at the age 100.
Outside the White House, where flags are flying at half-staff, Californian Cheryl Jones says Jimmy Carter was her favorite president.
He was just a good man, a decent man, an honest man, something we don't see very much in Bermuda.
Kit Burns, a resident of the Washington state city of Tacoma, best remembers Carter for his work building homes for people in need.
There's a number of Habitat for Humanity housing near where I live. And his dedication to helping other people, I think that's the primary purpose for all of us in our lives. And it's terrible, the state of the world is where we're not helping people. And he set such an example for so many years.
Carter showed the importance of caring about people, says Virginia Natosha Walker.
You're in public service, you're here to serve people. So that's the most important quality. And leading by example. You know, he had Bible study, he did Habitat for Humanity. Those are all good examples of how we should lead and how we should interact with our fellow Americans.
The New York Stock Exchange held a moment of silence for the former president before its opening bell Monday. New Jersey resident Dolores Spivak remembers Carter's work with Israelis and Palestinians.
I am so in awe of him. I'm in awe of his presidency because he was the one who fought for the environment, civil rights. But afterwards, his books that he wrote, especially on the Mideast, were tremendous. I get chills when I think about the Camp David Agreement.
Carter's death is an opportunity to learn more about his life and presidency, says Connecticut resident Kim Potvin.
I think a lot of the policy that he was involved with that I wasn't aware of, and also just kind of the economics and history of that time. So I always think that we learn a lot from history because it translates a lot to present day.
In Carter's hometown of Plains, Georgia, Sandra Walters remembers a friend who grew up across the street.
Thank you, Lord, for letting him live 100 years and do all the things that he wanted to do. And I think he accomplished so much that who could be sad over anybody who had done what that man had done from a little town in Plains, Georgia, raised on a peanut farm, and became the President of the United States.
Carter will be buried in Plains after a state funeral in Washington on January 9th.
Ngalena ndzaba ya former President Jimmy Carter siyadiphetha ngaphandle sibakhulu ukuthi sona sihlelisene nathi sidaba hlwete emakethe nasibuya sidabe sixoxisana nasanele Sibiya.
We've all got our own idea of what's good. For one person, it could be a bowl of ice cream. For another, it's listening to their favorite song. But for economists and governments, good is something else altogether. In fact, there's even something they call a public good. Does that mean sharing your ice cream? Not quite. Hi, I'm Alex. You probably use some form of a public good all the time. They're where a lot of our taxes go. Roads, schools, parks, even national defense. They're things that everyone in a country, taxpayer or not, can benefit from and enjoy without them ever being used up. And that's not even the half of it. If we adjust our scope, we see that these things are all around us. Sunshine, air, and a whole lot more. Economists consider these things public goods too, but they're even more than that. They're considered global public goods because they don't belong to any one country. They do still benefit us all, no matter where we come from. In fact, some of them, like clean air, are things we can't even live without. But they're sure not treated the same. For example, there's way more public funding for national defense than there is for fighting climate change. But is that how it should be? Think of it this way. If you stop maintaining a road, or a school, or a bridge for that matter, it would fall apart. So everyone pitches in through their tax money for upkeep and repairs to prevent that from happening. On a global scale, it's pretty similar. Unless countries come together to protect and maintain the things that we all benefit from, those global public goods, we'll be much worse off, and in some cases, we'll end up ruining them forever. In today's world, global public goods like the environment are under threat from pollution and overuse. And others like trade, financial stability, and public health are all global concerns that require maintenance and international cooperation. That's where international organizations come in, to keep the world connected on these issues. The G20 is a good example of that. We also have the United Nations for diplomacy, the World Health Organization for public health, and yeah, the IMF for economic growth and stability. But there's a role for us all to play here. The good news is that people and governments are increasingly recognizing their benefits. And if we act now, both current and future generations will get to enjoy them too.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Kusile Breakfast Show. Sekuvusele nalo sanza kusivule labesivelile ukuthi sitabe sikhulumisana na economist Sanele Sibiya. Sifuna ukuxoxisana naye ngetindzaba tekonga imali. Sisacala umnyaka lomusha nje sifuna sexwayise noma ke sayale ukuthi sisevesa amaswadi noma ke as consumers save kanjani imali, si investa kanjani. Singathothi khanza sisetikoletini letiningi sesiboleka imali kubo Shylock nekungenela ke titokfela letitawube setidla imali tefu. A very good morning and happy New Year, Mr. Sibiya. Thank you for joining us. Lamhla ekuseni Kusile Breakfast Show. How was your evening? Ungena kanjani eminyakeni lomusha?
I thank you, Lulu. Good morning and happy new year to you too. Thanks. No, we crossed over in a very matured way because sasmajala matsala sasibukile.
Yeah. All right. It's a brand new year, the 1st of January 2025. We've been looking forward to it, a brand new year. And also, ngatindzaba tetimali yathi ukuthi sivele siningi bantfu labanengi siyathanda ukuthi misuse imali, and by the end of the year kwanza ukuthi side imali, we have nothing in our savings. Why is it important ukuthi we should start now at looking ways on how to save money?
Thank you, Lou. That's a very important question. I've often said when people get to ask me about savings and the likes towards December and asking people to care about how they're going to get into December and January. And at that point, I often say it's already too late at that point. What you need is to start planning now. It's a new year. It's time to do things anew. So it's good to always have money stocked up somewhere for a rainy day. You don't know what eventualities will occur, and we don't know what life holds tomorrow, and we don't know what the future holds. So savings are actually quite potent for that purpose. It's what we call a precautionary type of money, and we also do need to save for our retirement. We need to save for the schools. There's quite a lot of things that we need to have money for, things that will require us to have quite a huge chunk of money when in essence we don't earn that huge chunk, and savings is one of the ways in which we do that. And basically just that rainy day, you don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, I know we get a lot of advices from financial advisors and economists such as yourself, Mr. Sibia, on the importance of saving money, but there are those that have little to none to save because of so many debts that they have. How do they get themselves out of those debts?
So the first thing with thinking around debt is when you are now serious about getting out of debt, because getting out of debt requires that you become serious about it and you put your mindset to it. It's more a psychological thing than it is a financial thing. Yes, at times life may happen and life may push you into debt, but getting out of debt requires that you be mentally ready for it. So that's the first step that I would say. Be mentally ready and know that you want to get out of debt. And once you have set out your mental acuity and you are there, you are now ready to get out of debt, then you make out a plan. You take your different debts and then you look at them, and then you will know which ones have more interest, which ones are longer term, and which ones are shorter term. And then you come up with a strategy that says either you pay off the ones with a bit of short-term debts with a higher interest, so that once you've gotten rid of those, what that gives you is more cash flow, not for your spending, but cash flow to continue flooding towards paying off your debt. So whatever you are able to get rid of, that doesn't necessarily mean you now have extra cash flow. What it means is until and unless you've gotten out of the debt, then whatever cash flow you have, make sure you pay a bit extra towards your debt. So that that should be the mindset that you have. Once you pay off that one loan or that one person that you owe, it doesn't mean now then the next month you have more money if you still have a lot of debts that you still need to pay. And then you could also look at around issues of consolidation. One of the things that we've noted with consolidation, though, Lou, is a lot of people, once you consolidate them, because this is a mental issue, once you consolidate them, they go back into debt, and then it becomes yet another cycle. And you find that at that point, there is just no other alternative to consolidate them. So they get stuck in that debt, and then it becomes a spiral type of thing where they're now robbing Peter to pay Paul. But if you do get that consolidation, what it means is, yes, all your debts will be taken into one basket, and you'll have this one obligation to pay. So you make up your budget, and once you've taken care of your bare necessities, make sure that you are also increasing the amount which you are now paying to this one huge consolidated debt, so that you are able to cut down on the interest payments towards that debt, and you are able to finish it off fast because the goal will be to get out of debt. It's not so that you are comfortable. So we need to first get that clear. The whole thing of consolidation, the goal should be to get you out of debt, not to get you comfortable so that you can live your life. That's why I say it's 90% mental and 10% saving and comfort, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you need to do.
Okay.
And then you also need to be able to speak to people. You need to be able to speak to people, have a financial advisor, and stick to the plan. So mental preparedness is critical.
All right. So, Mr. Spey, let's now get into saving and budgeting. We tend to overdo it sometimes. You find people having multiple streams of savings plans just because we always get the advice. You need to save, you need to invest your money. So, some people save more and then they are left with nothing. What is the rule of saving? For instance, for a person that earns 10,000 emalangeni per month, starting now on January, how do they go about, making their savings plan?
Your savings plan, Lou, will depend on what you want to do, right? Because your savings plan must be guided by the objectives that you want to attain. But the basics of it is do not put yourself in a savings overhang where now you've committed so much of your income to savings such that you are now struggling to actually make ends meet. And once you get yourself into that situation, you might find yourself going into debt now because you don't have money to live to get by on a daily basis, and your savings become virtually useless because whenever they mature, depending on what platform you're going to be using to do those savings, whenever they mature, they're then going to go into paying that debt. So make sure that you are not overstretched. So make sure that it's 10-20% of your disposable income. It shouldn't be of your net income. It should be that 10-20% of your disposable income so that you're able to also take care of your other daily expenses. But if you are saving for, say, towards certain purchases towards the end of the year, so you can go a bit aggressive there because it's more like you are paying that commodity which you want to buy at the end of the year. That's why I'm saying it depends on your objectives and why you are saving. But when you are saving just so that you have that money for a rainy day, that 10-20% threshold, or even however little, because the main thing with savings, Lou, is starting. Most people fail to even start to save. That's where we find ourselves stuck. We find ourselves stuck at that zero level where we are just not saving. So right now, my advice to people would be, if you want to think around savings, that salary increment which is coming, think around that money, because that's money you've not committed to anything. That's money you are not using for anything, in your daily expenses, and that's the money at which you should start thinking around saving. Take a portion of that, and also do away with certain things that you don't necessarily need on a daily basis, things that you can live without and still feel the same level of utility and be at that level of indifference. Take away those things, but don't go over aggressive at the very onset, because then you'll get too tired and you'll feel you are now being overstretched.
Yeah, some people, Mr. Sibia, use savings clubs, they use stokvels, others have piggy banks for their savings. Which one is more advisable?
I would say it depends. Your piggy bank for your coins and that small change that you have in the house, that's perfect. You need that one. But for your longer term savings, which the Americans would call a 401k, where you are saving for retirement or you are saving for those rainy days. I think along the lines of the financial institutions, think of that monthly debit order to your account just to take that money, put it into your savings, and you still have a bit of liquidity there. Think all around your savings and credit cooperatives. Again, that gives you a bit of money stock somewhere and which you can have access to when you need. But the whole point should not be that you're planning around needing it. And then also break down your savings as well. Make sure that you have money saved up that's relatively liquid, which you can get anytime you need it. That's what we need for our rainy days. And then for this long-term savings plan, what you need, then you need to think around the products that the financial services offer, where you are just putting it there and you are not even thinking of taking that money out at any point in time. So the platform that you are going to use depends on what you need money for. And then there's also this issue of stokvels. I mean, stokvels are quite good, and it's one way we can empower each other as a community. But what we need to do before we pump our money into it is to make sure that we do put in place the right the right modalities and mechanisms to ensure that nobody is able to disappear with the money. And right now, the banks have quite a number of accounts which we can use to do those things, to put the stock for money. And maybe one of the things that I would really suggest to Eswatini is, yes, stokvels are good, but can we move from these stokvels that are purely for food and think around stokvels that will help us generate more income, or where you're saving money for you to be able to do something in future that will generate you more income. It's not to say these food stokvels are not good, because I mean it does provide you with food to last you for a longer period of time, but also think income generation, think of savings for capital as well, so that your money is able to generate itself and you are able to save even more for that rainy day or for that project which you are saving for.
Yeah, as you highlighted, Mrs. Bia, when you started this conversation, that a lot of people find themselves in a lot of debts, hence they go for loans. What should we consider, before taking loans, the interest rates, before we take loans? Some other service providers send a message you can now revolve. Is that even advisable?
So, one of the things that we've found when what studies have shown is, countries where it's relatively easy to get loans, people don't save because literally they know they can get that money whenever they need it. They can go get a loan and then they'll pay it off over time. But that has what we call dynamic inconsistent effect, that going forward into the future, you're going to be a nation that has not mobilized enough savings to fund its development agendas, even our own consumption expenditures. And then in the long term, that is not good for a country to become overly indebted. So with that said, what we need to be able to think around, Lou, is yes, banks and financial institutions are in it to make money. They are not in it to make your life easier. They are in business. So they will always send you that text message to say, come get more money. And if you are not mentally disciplined and you don't have a mental goal and a financial plan, you will find yourself taking that loan. So I would always say, take a loan if and only if you must, then take that loan. But otherwise, if you are just taking a loan just for the sake so you can have money to go spend it and have fun, then that's not a good loan, because at the end of the day, you are still going to have to pay for it. If you take money, you take it to go to Durban. Again, that's not a good loan because you're still going to pay for it for the next 5 years and Durban will be gone. And, that's quite common. We've all fallen trapped to those things. Hence, I say it's more a mental thing. Right now we have other banks which would, at a press of a button, you get access to that loan at a press of a button on your cell phone. So what that now has turned back into is that strong that strong mentality on the side of the consumer to know and discern what loans are good for them. Loans that are good for you is loans that you are going to use to invest into something that will make you money, right, in the future, or loans that you are going to invest into assets, loans that are going to help improve your balance sheet. For example, you're buying your furniture and all of those other durable commodities that in a way contributes to your balance sheet because it has salvage value, or you can sell it at some point when things get get tough. The salvage value you can get from them compared to these loans that we are just going to take and go for crossovers as people were doing yesterday, or we're planning for Easters and whatnot. There's no salvage value there. So I advise people to always avoid such loans and focus on taking those loans and using them for something that will be somehow of an asset item in their balance sheet. And people should make it a habit to, do your own balance sheet once in a while, see how much your net worth is. That's what is going to help you understand the impact of those loans and the impact of the decisions that we are making. But if you don't have that balance sheet, you are not going to be able to see it. But at the end of the day, let's avoid consumption loans for the sake of consumption loans and focus on loans that are going to help improve our lives. And then there are those life circumstances like paying for your education and all of those things. Again, that's an investment loan because education pays for itself at the end of the day. So we need to look at our expenses and ask yourself, can I survive without this? Do I really need to owe somebody and pay somebody interest without this? And then also another thing that we need to be careful of, Lou, is the interest. Right now, interest rates are going down, and we need to be aware of the fact that interest rates are also going to go up in future. So I always say to people, when you are applying for a loan and looking at your affordability, take a 10-year chart and look at interest rates and how they were moving in the past 10 years, and then ask yourself that if the interest rates were to go back to that very high level that they once reached at a certain point, will I still be able to afford this loan? Would I still be able to pay it off and not feel extremely stretched? So those are decisions those are the things that we need to start doing before we take a loan, or else think around going to, one of those fixed interest loans. We do have institutions that give those fixed interest loans, and also avoid getting loans from non-registered service providers. Always focus on those registered service providers that are guided by the laws of the land, because those actually have more mechanisms to protect you as a consumer and also protect the service provider. Thank you.
Mr. Sbia, schools will be opening next month in January, and a lot of parents are under a lot of pressure. They're yet to buy school uniforms, pay school fees, transport fares, etc. They're frustrated right now. They're considering taking a loan or considering approaching a loan shark. What options do they have at this moment?
At this moment, like I always say, Lou, at this moment it becomes a bit, it's a bit late if the person doesn't have a plan. So right now, the only option they would have would be to approach their bank and see what can be done. And the beautiful thing with banks is banks can always be talked to. Banks understand you as their client, and they can always try to do something compared to going to that loan shark, right? So we really do advise people not to go to loan sharks, because loan sharks tend to have high interest rates. And, make sure that even if push comes to shove, make sure it's money you can pay off in just one installment, so that you avoid that high interest, because that takes a lot of money. But the key here is planning ahead and planning for it, knowing in advance and knowing a priori that I have a child who's going to go to school next year and they are going to need money. That's where savings come into play. You know that if my child is in grade 1, for example, or in this certain level, every month I should make it a point to put aside, say, 300. If you earn 10,000, now just have the 300 that's going to go somewhere and be stored there for that rainy day. Or think around, even if you do have those stock files where you're going to share the money at the end of the day, that's another good way to save for your school fees and for your children's expenses, where you take one of those savings clubs that are going to release the money probably in December, and you take the money you pay. So it's planning ahead. At this point, what we would say is, yes, if you don't have that option, go look for that loan, but think of a plan on how you're going to pay it, and think around how you are going to do next year, how you are going to handle the issue next year. And then going forward, know that when that bonus check comes in, that's the check that you should be using for these January expenses. Remember, that's your 13th check. So that means your monthly expenses and your Christmas expenses should be able to fit ideally into your December paycheck, your 12th check, and then the 13th check, that additional money, which you can take and throw towards those expenses, and also think around those savings and think around those expenses. Always foresee your expenses, see them up front, and develop that mentality to get out of debt. That one is very much important. It's a mental battle. It's not a battle for the money. It's a battle of the head to make sure that your debt stays at controllable levels and you don't go into unnecessary debt.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Spear, for that advice. Parents particularly, will you take this they do save money starting now in January. Thank you so much. That was economist Sanelis B, just giving us tips on how to save money on this new year 2025. Thank you for tuning in today. This was the first episode of Kusile Breakfast Show on this brand new year. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a lovely day.